3, 2, 1.
On the bench.
On the bench, or as we say in Arabic, على البنش. This is a very special episode today. We get a lot of questions most of the time, like, why do you write RBE? What is RBE? So we brought the founder of RBE. We would like to have a small introduction for the people that don't know you, Mike.
Sure. Yeah, let's see. I started powerlifting, started thinking of myself as a powerlifter in like 1997 and competing nationally in 2003. And I started coaching powerlifting probably 2004 or 2004 or so. And pretty quickly found myself in a situation where I had a good bit of experience. You know, at that point, I'd been training 6 or 7 years myself, which is not as much as I thought it was at the time, but it's also it's not nothing either. And but I found myself in this situation where I was the experienced one on the team, and everyone else on my team had less experience. So I was trying to bring them along and help them develop and help them to notice things in their training that was more like what I was noticing and what other advanced lifters would notice in their own training. For myself, I was constantly reading about training and just trying to absorb as much as I could. I was obsessed with training, still am obsessed with training. And so one of the things that I was reading about was the RPE scale, which has its roots in endurance training. The original RPE scale was developed by Gunnar Borg for endurance sports. And the idea behind that one was that it was a 6 to 20 scale. So you would rate the difficulty on a scale of 6 to 20. And the hope was that it would correlate with like heart rate. So if you're running at a 10 RPE, that would correlate to 100 beats per minute. But it didn't quite work out that way. But it was still a useful idea. And over time, people just started using like a 1 to 10 scale for difficulty. But still, all the RPE scales that I came across were very general. Like 10 RPE is maximum effort, 9 RPE is heavy effort. And it's like, well, what's the difference between those things, right? Now, at the same time, in a different context, there were lifters. Well, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Elite FTS, and that they used to have a Q&A on the Elite FTS website where Dave Tate and others would answer questions. People would write in questions, they would answer them. And there was this theme that I was noticing from reading the Q&A where they were talking to people about leaving a rep in the tank. Lots of people, when they would do their accessory work, they were taking everything to failure. You do your tricep extensions, you take it to failure. You do your whatever it would be, glute ham raises, anything, you take it to failure. And they're like, well, you could leave a rep in the tank and it makes it easier to recover from. You could do an extra set if you need additional stimulus, but makes the recovery easier, and you're able to keep your technique and reduce your injury risk and whatever we thought at the time. And I thought, like, well, you could kind of marry these two ideas up, right? You could take this idea of leaving a rep in the tank, or you could leave 2 reps in the tank or 3 reps in the tank. It doesn't have to be just one. So you could kind of meld these two ideas together. So you've got your 10 RPE maximum effort, but what if you defined a 9 RPE as like leaving a rep in the tank? You can define an 8 RPE as leaving 2 reps in the tank. And then as I continued to work on it, it developed into the RPE chart that most people are familiar with today, where when we talk about 7 RPEs, it's not quite perfectly correlated to RIR anymore. And maybe I'm skipping ahead in our conversation a little bit, but at the lower RPEs, it sort of diverges from reps in reserve a little bit more. But yeah, that's kind of the origin story for how it developed.
Oof, very interesting.
Very interesting. But I think he forgot to mention how big he is in powerlifting.
Yeah,
like
very...
you are very humble, but we got here like a multiple world champion right here. Can you just give us a brief about your powerlifting career and achievement?
Sure. Sure. So I competed. My first international competition was the Junior World Championship in 2005. I won the Junior World Championship in 2006. I graduated from university in 2007, so didn't do any international competitions then. But from 2008 to 2015, competed internationally, I think pretty much every year. Um, I won the World Games in 2009. Set some world records when the IPF started offering Raw Classic competitions in 2012. I was there at the first Classic World Cup in 2012, the first Classic World Championship in Suzdal in 2013, and so on. Um, Took a break from competing from 2016 until about a year ago in 2022. Recently came back to it. Powerlifting has evolved quite a bit in the. I mean, I've continued to coach the whole time, so it's not like it was a surprise. But uh, to experience it as a competitor it's been fun, honestly. But powerlifting is continuing to evolve and become a very competitive space. I'm glad to be kind of doing the athlete
It's
side of the sport again as well.
it's really interesting that Mike has been through the beginning of powerlifting, and he saw the growth in coaching, in athletes, in the way of thinking. So it's very interesting, and I think that's gonna add a lot of fruitful ideas and insights in our conversation today.
Yeah, because I saw like a video of you saying that you are competing in the 120, and once upon a time, like Dennis just came and beated you. Like
Yeah.
you've seen how like there was some strength standard, and right now these strength standard are not standards. So people are getting stronger, or they are training better, or it's just the genetic pool have gotten bigger.
Yeah. I think it's a bit of everything. I think it's hard to deny that as powerlifting has gotten more popular, there's more talented people that are coming into the sport. But I think people in general train better than they used to. I remember a time when people would the things that we used to make fun of other lifters for have changed quite a bit. I mean, it's maybe a weird way to come at the question, but like you used to uh, joke about people not squatting to depth or just the things that people took for granted in training are things that are not like we don't even recognize them as helpful anymore. So, uh, like the idea that you should only train a lift once a week, you should only squat or deadlift once a week, or even deadlift even like once every 2 weeks, or that you shouldn't like not only should you train them infrequently, but you shouldn't train them heavy either,
Mhm.
because you should. There was also a belief back then that you shouldn't go over 90% of your 1RM very frequently because you know bad things would happen. People would essentially they believe that you would accumulate a lot of fatigue, which is true. So it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, though. If you never touch heavy weights, then yeah, it's more taxing. But it turns out if you are exposed to heavy weights frequently, then you get used to it, just like you do anything else. If you take, say you go on vacation and you take a couple weeks off and you come back and you squat, you're sore for a solid week after that first squat session, right? But we don't take that as an indication that you should only squat once every 7 days or something. Um, so we don't take things to mean the same things that people commonly took them to mean before. So I do think training has gotten better. Um, but I think it's also just hard to deny that the talent pool has gotten deeper. Um, I think we owe classic powerlifting for that. To be honest, that people just didn't seem to be that interested in equipped powerlifting. and people did it because they were good at lifting weights, and that's how you would compete. But classic powerlifting has seemed to make powerlifting in general a lot more accessible to everyone.
It's much easier.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's return to the subject of
Sure.
the RPE. When
Yeah.
did the RPE have been introduced into lifting? Like I've heard some stuff that it was you started the RPE in the lifting world.
Yeah, I started it as we know it in powerlifting now. I mean, the concept itself has roots in endurance sports, and maybe someone used it for strength training before, but not in the way that we do it now. So now we think of a 9 RPE as 1 rep in the tank kind of thing.
Mm.
Um, that did not exist to my knowledge before me. I developed a chart that is still pretty widely used nowadays.
So since you have mentioned that the training methodologies has been improving and a lot of false methodologies and ideas has been buried, how do you think RBE has changed lifting nowadays?
Yeah, I think most people will use RPE to some extent in most powerlifting programs that I'm aware of, at least. There are not too many anymore that use strict percentages. Some, of course, but not that many. Uh, and I think it helps a lot in uh, kind of the online environment that powerlifting has developed in. Um, if you look at a coach like Boris Shako, who all of his programs contain primarily percentages, but when I spoke with Boris years ago, um, and asked him about how he conducts his training, he was there with his lifters as they were training, right?
Uh-huh.
And so he would make adjustments. So maybe the program says 80% for 4, but he would notice things about their technique or how they were moving. And so he would make some adjustments. They would go up 5 kilos or go down 5 kilos or something like that. That's essentially, I mean, if it's not RPE, that's auto-regulated training. It's individualized training. And I think that's indicative of how lifters have always done it. I think we've used percentages, and if you look at like the old magazines with the old programs in them, they're all percentage-based programs, but the people that did the programs would always make these little adjustments to it. So, uh, but if you never trained with those people, or if you didn't have the experience, like how would you make those adjustments?
Mm.
You, people didn't, and they didn't know that they were supposed to even. So RPE is a tool that allows less experienced people to make those adjustments, and it's a way to talk about making those adjustments. I believe that you should still go to the gym with a plan. You should still have your target weights. You should know what you're trying to do. I don't advocate going to the gym with just kind of no idea. Well, it's going to be a triple at 8 RPE, and I have no idea what that's going to be. It could be 100 kilos, it could be 200 kilos, and I don't know. Like, no, that's leaving too much open for interpretation. I think you should have an idea of what you want to do. I want it to be 170 kilos for a triple at an 8 RPE. And then as you're working up to it, you can make small adjustments to that. Maybe things are not moving so well on the way up. So you adjust it down so you can still get to that triple at 7 RP or triple at 8 RPE. But instead of 170 kilos, it's 165 kilos or 167.5 kilos. Or maybe things are doing better than you thought they would be, which our training is supposed to work. So hopefully it's better, right? So instead of 170, you can do 172.5. You can take advantage of the strength when you've got it.
So you advise the people to actually have an idea what will they lift in the gym. But
Mhm.
if that's the idea, why not write the weights beforehand? Let's say if I'm gonna do a block, let's just write the weights in every week. Should
Mhm.
that be a good idea, or no? You should actually pick the weight at the day of the gym.
Well, I can tell you the way that I do it in my system is that at the start of each week, our system will run for each lifter, and it'll look at what they did before and give them a target weight for the following week.
Mhm.
So if I'm going to say squat on Monday, it'll look at what I did last week and say, okay, based on last week, you need to do 170 kilos for triple at 8 RPE. And uh, you could try to project that forward, but I find that the further you project it, the less accurate it becomes.
Yeah.
And lifters tend to we don't like it when the plan changes too much.
Mm.
So if I project forward 4 weeks and in 4 weeks I expect to be lifting 180, but it's only 177.5, then I feel like I've lost something. When in reality, I haven't lost anything. It's just the plan was inaccurate. you know, it's the plan's fault, not anything else. So I don't project forward weeks in advance like that. I'll say based on last week, this is what we need to do this week, but we're going to adjust it based on actual performance, and then for the next week, we'll again produce some target weights and make adjustments from there.
Okay, what about if, let's say, the plan was like 4 weeks, we were going really great, and we are progressing every week. Let's say the fourth week, something happened. I had an accident or something like that, and I feel stressed out. That would actually reduce the projected weight, or should I
Exactly.
force myself?
No, it would potentially reduce the weight depending on how it's affected you, right?
Mm.
And that's something that a coach can't really predict. If you have someone who's just by their nature a very nervous person, maybe those outside events affect them a lot, or maybe for someone else, that just doesn't affect them very much. And the coach's ability to predict any of that's going to be quite limited. Again, if you were there with them in person, you
Mhm.
could make those adjustments as you carry out your warm ups. But you want to have, in my situation, for most of us in kind of an online coaching scenario, you need to create a structure that gives the athlete the ability to make those decisions in the moment. They have to be able to decide, that's not there today. I need to reduce the weight, or I'm feeling really good today and can push the weight up. But is there a point where that's too much or not? Well, it's up to the coach to create that structure.
I think
Yeah.
now most of the listeners would ask themselves, all right, I might have a weight goal that I want to hit 180 or 200 in that
hmm
week, but how can I measure the RBE so I can adjust this weight accordingly? Because I feel like it's very confusing. Like, what's the difference between
Yeah.
an RBE 6 or RBE 7 or RBE 7 and RBE 8? So, how to measure the RBE for that set?
So we will do a lot of it through the warm up. If we have a scenario where the goal is a top set of a triple at RPE 8, there will be 1 to 2 sets prior to that we would use to gauge performance. It depends a bit on the lifter. If we're talking about some lifters, their performance is quite volatile. They have big ups and downs, and other people are fairly consistent. It's better to find your way to a more consistent performance. I find that those people tend to improve more consistently than people where performance is volatile. So usually if performance is volatile, that means there's some variable I need to adjust, you know. But you still have to train while you're sorting all that out. So monitoring the warm-up sets is the way to go. And everyone is a little bit different. But through monitoring that warm-up set, you'll come to know, if I do, let's see, if I do 160 for a triple at RPE 7, then I can handle, 10 more kilos and get my RPE 8, you know. So I did 160, that was a triple at RPE 7, so I can do 170 for a triple, and it should be RPE 8. So then this week you did your 60, excuse me, I'm getting my numbers tongue-tied here. You did 160 for a triple, and it was RPE 6.5, you know. You go, okay, today's feeling really good. Maybe I should push it a bit more, instead of going 170, maybe I'll go 172.5 or maybe 175, Um, and then you attempt that for your RPE 8. And it can go the other way as well. You do your 160, and that's a triple at RPE 7.5. And you go, well, maybe I should hold the weight back a little bit. And you come to know this, this is, there's levels to this too. And I'll speak about it anyway. I hope it's not too confusing for those newer to RPE. But as you get more accustomed to it, you do that 160, and maybe it's off. Maybe the performance is not as good as you expected, but that you just were distracted. You weren't bringing the right energy to it. So go for it anyway. It's still your decision. You still decide what weight to put on the bar. The system doesn't decide for you, but the system is giving you some information. So hopefully you can make a good decision.
Yeah. So exactly, it's by feeling sometime, because I have a lifter. Before 2 days, he was competing at the 83 kg weight class, and he failed the second attempt at 207. He failed it, and I went to him, and he said, "No, we can increase the weight," and he was so serious about it. So okay, we increased the weight, and it was RPE 7. So you failed a lesser weight, and you did more weight with the less RPE. So it's sometimes just by hunch. You can feel it.
Yeah, and you develop that sense over time. RPE, I think, helps lifters develop it earlier, earlier in their career, but it still takes time and experience to get there. But it's a saying that I have with my lifters all the time. I tell them, don't let a spreadsheet tell you to do something stupid. It's what's written on the program, but you are the one with the brain. You are the one who decides. There's information that comes out of it, and it helps us to make a good decision, but ultimately it's up to us. And it can go the other way as well. Your warm up feels good, but if your hamstring is just not feeling right, what's the smart decision? Should we go ahead and push it? All the bar speed indications and everything says push it, but in your mind that this is not a good choice. So make a good choice. That's the thing that I harp on all the time, is making good training decisions. Lots of times better information helps us to make good training decisions, but it's up to the decision maker to make it,
Yeah.
I noticed this in my training as well. Most of the time, I get myself injured. The sit before I get the pain in my hamstring or on my lower back, my brain was telling me not to do that sit, but like go hard or go home sometimes gets into us. Then I'm like, I wish I listened to how I felt.
Yeah. And there is two type of people, actually. Like there is, I think some people listen to their body and some people don't. And sometimes there is the extreme of that. Some people, I call them the undershooters. You give them RPE 9, they send a video of RPE 5. And there's some people who do RPE 10 and they say, oh, it's RPE 6. So how do you deal with these kind of people?
If it's a lot, like the scenario, I know you're probably exaggerating, but if it's a lot, then we'll try to correct it, but if it's a little bit, then I may mention it, but there's also a bit of room for debate on some of these things based on the lifter. If they send me a video and they say as RPE 8, and I look and I think I would have said 7.5,
Mm.
probably close enough,
Yeah.
and it's also, it's a rating of perceived exertion. So their perception of it matters. If they feel like it's an 8, then that's worth considering. But if it's wildly inaccurate, then it's worth an intervention.
So, as a coach or as an athlete, what are the variables you usually look for in a video of the execution of the set that might set the RPE? Like I can say this is RPE 8 or 7. What are the variables you
Yeah.
look for in a video?
The main thing that I'm looking for RPE assessment is velocity, the speed of the rep. And that's one thing that makes the velocity measurement tools so valuable now. And they're becoming more and more accessible as well. I really like it when athletes have that available. So at this point as well, there's apps that you can put on your phone that can calculate RPE from a video. Depending on which app, sometimes they're a little bit awkward to use. So you may not want to do it for every set, but like I've got a few athletes who use the phone apps, and will use it for their heaviest competition set of the week. So it's only 3 sets per week that they have to calculate. But that gives us a good idea of their performance, and it's more accurate, more detailed than just our subjective rating, and it's helpful for gauging progress and things like that. If you can get an actual velocity device, then you can measure every rep. Not that that solves every problem. It comes with its own set of data problems, but lots of times you develop a sense for that as well. Like for me, my RPE on the bench, RPE 8 on the bench tends to be between whatever it is, say
Yeah.
0.28 and 0.30. I don't know if that's correct or not, but it doesn't matter because it varies a bit from lifter to lifter and also from lift to lift. So, which is the complexity of velocity, I think, is the thing that steers lots of people away from it. And that's fine. You can always come back to RPE, and that's a fairly simple thing to implement. But if you look at RPE and you think it's a little bit too subjective, it's not accurate enough or anything like that, then I would encourage you to layer velocity on top of it, and it can be uh, quite useful and quite accurate. I've been using velocity in my training since like 2009.
Can we actually correlate the bar speed or the velocity with RPE for different lifters? Let's say, so we can actually say the bar speed that it's this will correlate to RPE 9 to all people, or it's
Well,
individualized?
not to all people, but what I do for my lifters is I develop these velocity tables. I'll develop one for squat, for bench, and for deadlift, and it'll be specific to that lifter. So here's
Ah,
for you, velocity. Uh, uh, I'm trying to pull up mine now, and I could tell you, I could tell you for me, a velocity between 0.28 and 0.30 on the bench is an 8 RPE, which is a fairly narrow range, but that's where I am for an 8 RPE. Um, for you, it will be different from that, and squat will be different from bench, and so on.
Amazing.
that's really interesting.
I might actually buy one.
You should.
Yeah.
When you go to Malta with him,
Yeah, I will try yours.
Yeah, definitely. I'll have it with me, and I'll show you. I'll show you all my notes and everything on it as well. And
yeah, because
Yeah.
I feel like it's barely used in our powerlifting society, and
Yeah,
whatever that might add to your performance, like why not to try it? That's the
Exactly.
yeah. I think it's a lot of it is the complexity of it, because
True.
you're talking about managing lots of data and needing a system for managing that data. And, you know, I think I understand why. It just needs to be done a bit better. And if it was, then I think that's kind of the next evolution of auto-regulated training,
So now,
especially for the deadlift. Not to take us on a tangent, but RPE in particular for the deadlift is difficult,
true.
right?
Yes.
Like the idea of reps in reserve for the deadlift is difficult. To give you an example, I tested some of my deadlift rep maxes, and I forget exactly what it was, but I took 85% for like 8 reps or something like that, and that's fairly ridiculous. You know, it's not it's not what you want even, but it's also at the same time difficult to look at, say, an 85% triple and say, "Oh, that was a 5 RPE."
I
It
think
doesn't feel like a 5 RPE, you know?
I think it's because there is a lot of limiting factors. Because
Yeah.
there is the grip issue. Because I can actually like hold on to 260 kg and do like 12 reps, and sometimes I cannot handle like 330 kg. So
Mhm.
I think it's because of that. And sometimes you just stop because it feels unbearable, not because
Yeah,
you are failing or something like that.
right. And you wouldn't even necessarily want to push it like an 85% rep for 85% set for what? You're gonna do 6 or 7 reps with that? That's not how I would want to train my deadlift. So it doesn't make it like the idea of reps in reserve as it relates to that doesn't make sense. Now you can still use RPE in a more intuitive way. That's another quality of it, is that RPE differences between RPE and reps in reserve is that past a certain point, you can use an RPE a bit more like you use a language. You
Mhm.
know, you use words. I have a 8-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter, and they ask me lots of times, I'm saying something to them, and they say, "What does that mean?" I have to stop and think about, how do I explain to you what this word means? I just know. I've used it all. I use this word all the time, and I just know what it means.
Mm.
And then explaining it is difficult. And I think RPE can become that way uh, with a bit of time. Sorry, it's a background noise
No, it's
ticket
right.
here, but um, RPE can become that, take on that kind of linguistic quality over time, and that's how I would use it for the deadlift. But velocity gives you another layer to that by letting you um, giving you a bit more insight on what's going on. There's ways to. I don't know how technically we want to go into velocity specifically, but there's ways to use velocity to help you with deadlifting.
So now, from the way you explain it, there's no major difference between RBE and RIR.
Because it's all by feeling. Like I can
Or what do
say,
you think?
because RIR, I can say there is 2 reps in reserve, but it's just a feeling. I couldn't know there is 2 reps in reserve until I try. So
Correct, but it's the same with like the what the velocity tells us is that there is an answer to that, even if we don't necessarily know it right now. We don't test it, but sometimes we test it, and then we can kind of make these correlations that, you know, say my last rep velocity on the bench was 0.28, and I say, oh, that was 7 RPE. You may say, maybe it feels like 7 RPE, but every other time that you did 0.28 is actually 8 RPE, you know?
but let's say that there is some days you can grind and some days you
Mm.
don't, because sometimes I just come and I can take 260 kg for 8 reps, and for another day with the same situations I do less reps or more reps, or I can grind. Some days I can grind, sometimes some days I'm faster, stuff like that. Because there is a lot of variables in lifting. You cannot really specify this is RIR 2, but in another day it will be RIR 3.
So how would you regulate your training then, if it's variable in that way?
You just go by feeling. That's it. Because I just project stuff and I rate it as an RPE measure as of hardness more than velocity, and how I feel about it and how I perceive it. And by that, I can know for sure if I can increase the weight the next week or not. And depends on the variables on that day or the week, I will know for sure if it is my real potential or not. Because some days I come to the gym while my sleep is not that good, and if the lift doesn't feel alright, I know for sure this is not my full potential because of the variables that happen.
Yeah. So what I hear is you're really relying on the feeling, the perception of it, and that you're not trying to match it up with reps in reserve so much, but um, the feeling itself is a way to get around the performance variable.
Yeah, that's what I actually do. Because sometimes when I look at the video, it looks so fast, but it felt so hard because of stuff that happened that day. Sometimes when sleep is not good, the lifts feels harder, even though they are faster.
Yeah, yeah. So in that case, would you change the amount of work that you do, or just the load, the bar weight?
For me, I just change the load. I don't actually change the work.
Okay. Okay. That's interesting. I'm always curious to hear like how other high level powerlifters are training. So do you, I mean, you're going to Malta, so clearly you're very strong and you've been doing this a while. So uh, did you develop this sort of ability over your years of training, or is this something that do you think you are better at it than most people, or can everyone learn how to do what you're doing?
The thing is, I don't think anyone can do it because I had actually 3 severe injuries in my backs, and each injury taught me something. And when I listen to my body, the injury doesn't come back. And when I don't listen to that feeling, the injury comes. So that's why I just, because some people, when I train people, some people, when they are final exams, they actually feel better. They lift more because they are feeling frustrated. They want to take it out of the gym. But for me, when I have exams, no, I feel really bad. I feel sluggish and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it depends on the lifter and his perception of what makes him feels better or feels bad.
Well, you said something that I think is a key here as well, that you talked about listening to your body, and that was a really big thing for me in kind of those early days when I was working on the development of the RPE chart. Because all these same guys that I was listening to were talking about this, like, right? Like, you've got to listen to your body. You need to learn how to do that. And the question that would come back is like, all right, great. How do I do that? And they say, well, I can't really teach you how to do it. You just have to train. And after about 10 years, you figure it out. And I thought, I'm coaching all these guys who are, like have like 1 year under the bar. Like, it's difficult to tell them to just keep going for another 9
Yeah.
and they'll just figure it out. It's like, can we speed up the process? So a lot of what I was trying to do was to understand what those experienced lifters like yourself, like, what are you noticing?
Mm.
And I think RPE velocity is part of it. But like, clearly what you're describing is it goes a bit further than that. And then some people, like, I would put myself in this category too, are just not that good at noticing some things.
Mm.
Like the back injury component that you spoke about really resonates with me because I've had this back injury, and for the most part, I'm better now. Well, you guys were asking me about my competition history, and I mentioned that I had this 6-year-long break in competing. It's because I had a back injury that never really went away, and all the things that I was trying to do, um, it would always come back. And in hindsight, what I understand now is that, like, I had an injury, and I would take some time off, and it would go away, but then I would try to go back to what I was doing before, and it was not appropriately managed. Like, the loading was not done well enough.
Mm.
You know, maybe it was good enough for a strained pec or certain injuries, but it was not good enough for this injury. So it went on, and I got frustrated and eventually said, I'm not going to compete until I get this taken care of. And I probably took longer than I needed, but I took a long break from competing. But now, as I've developed my ability to do load management, uh, that's been a huge change for me in my own training. And the more detailed I get about it, the better my experience becomes. In the time since I've come back, I've had minor flare-ups here and there, and I had one prior to the last national championship. Spoke about on I think on my YouTube, talk about like having a back flare-up 2 weeks prior to competing and things like that. But even since then, I've gone more detailed, more deep into load management about specific things that tend to be a trigger. For me, for whatever reason, I can't feel it. So I have to externalize it. I have to make a process around it. So far, anyway, I've been able to manage it. I'm training. I feel like I'm training well and getting stronger again. And my back isn't hurting and things seem to be fine. So fingers crossed that continues.
Hopefully,
But
yeah.
it's been a process of going deeper into load management.
I think you have mentioned something is very important for all the novice to intermediate lifters that are listening to us. That you mentioned after an injury, you were trying to do like a similar weight or similar loading techniques, and the injury would reoccur. And this is something I think every lifter has to go through the phase of injury, lower back, shoulder, but especially the lower back. People have to understand that their capacity is not the same for lifting, but most of the lifters, they have, I don't want to say ego, but they feel like after the injury, after the pain is gone, like I have to go back to the same weights I was lifting.
Yeah, that will.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and that will flare it up because the thing is, you said you have a flare up before nationals. I actually had a flare up 1 week ago.
He had that. You know it, right?
Yeah.
We all know it.
I like first time I have it went for 6 months. Second time I had it 8 weeks. This time I dealt with it differently. It took me
2 days.
2 days. 2 days. First day I couldn't even squat an empty barbell. After 2 days I squatted 545. After 3 days I deadlifted
300 kilos.
300 kilos. So I was like, man, am I different or did I handle it way different? But it just, I lowered down the weight. I actually didn't lower it that much, but it's just mentally I was different. I was moving. I was trying to move. I was trying to do the stuff that I do regularly. But when it comes down to the gym, I just go back to the weight. Like the second day, I went back to 6 plate deadlifts and I stopped there. While in that day, it wasn't an RPE 8 at all. I had a prescribed RPE 8, but I stopped at 6 plate because I was happy about it. 6 plates after 2 days with injury, I'm happy about it. So I just went back home and that's it.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, I would be the same. You know, I think load management in general is something that powerlifters are lots smarter on now than we used to be. Even just going back to when my injury started, we're way better at this than we used to be. But totally, just the understanding that you can't go back ever. Like, that's just not how time works, you know? And so once you've had an injury, you don't go back to the program that you used to do. You go forward, and maybe there are similarities, maybe a lot of similarities to what you used to do. But it's not the same. It shouldn't be the same.
Mm.
At a minimum, if you have to take some time off, the workloads should be adjusted because you haven't been training, you know, your condition is different. But then perhaps there's something that's a bit more ongoing, and some depends on the injury, right? But like in the case of my injury, what I know now that I did not know back in 2016 was that my injury seems to be provoked by anything that makes me lean forward. So back squats, low bar back squats, good mornings, deadlifts and Romanian deadlifts and things like that are all issues. Now, those are huge staples of any sort of powerlifting training, right? But if I could go back to 2016 and say, you know, what you need to do is focus on front squats and do these accessory movements that, you know, don't put that same kind of loading on your back. You can still do squatting and deadlifting, but it needs to be limited in these ways, and you can progress. You can still progress. You can still get stronger. You can still train. You can still enjoy the training, but it just needs to be different. And maybe eventually it leads back to a place that looks like what I used to do, or maybe it doesn't. Who knows?
Hmm.
But the important thing is to change it so that it's appropriate for now, you know? And we're way better at that than we used to be.
Okay.
That's really
Yeah.
good mentality. Like people keep wishing that they did things differently, but as you mentioned,
Yeah.
time doesn't work like that. Do the best with what you have right now, and this mentality is what brought me back to squatting and deadlifting again after stopping for like 3-4 years after my injury. So it's very important to focus on what you have and what you can do best right now.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. And I think it's better to ask this question. Let's say a beginner, his first year in training, should he use RPE, or what is the method of training that he could follow?
Yeah, I think he should use RPE. So I'm not always the most current on all the research, but my understanding is that research shows that even novice lifters can use RPE with acceptable ranges of accuracy. But if you are uncomfortable with that for any reason, you could regulate the training by whatever means you like, but just have them practice rating their RPE, because I do think that there's a trainable quality to it, as long as you're trying to get better at it, you know, and you're paying attention. And that may even be better because there's less ego wrapped up in it, you know. If it doesn't affect the training that you'll be doing next week, uh, you know, you can maybe be a little bit more honest, or hopefully it allows people to be a little bit more honest. I think we should strive for honesty in training anyway, but um, I understand why people struggle with that sometimes. If, you know, they have training that's, you know, if I say this is an 8, then that means I have to reduce my training loads next week, and that can be difficult for people to accept, you know. So they say it's a 7 instead, you know, so that they can increase the weights next week. You shouldn't do that, but I understand why people do that. But if you're a novice and you know, the training weights next week are not dependent on the rating that I give this set, then, you know, hopefully that allows you to get around some of that psychology baggage.
I would like to have your insight on something, since my background for like the last 10 years comes from bodybuilding. Do you feel bodybuilders or people who want to build as much muscle as they can benefit from RBE as well?
Yeah, I think so. I don't see why not. If I was going to train for bodybuilding, yeah, I would still execute the training similarly to how I do now. I would change the contents of the training, of course, but I don't think I would change the execution of it all that much.
Amazing, amazing. I think this question, we skipped it, but I think it's important. In powerlifting programming, I see a lot of people follow different methods. Some people start with some certain RPE and they increase the RPE week by week. And some people just stick to one RPE. They say RPE 7 for the full of the block. Is there a benefit to this, or is there a right or wrong?
I wouldn't go so far as to say there's a right or wrong, but I tend to program with somewhat more static RPEs. So if I, write triple at 8 RPE, then it would be triple at 8 RPE every week through the block. And as the lifter adapts and gets stronger, the weights will go up. Week 1 we use 170, week 2 we use 172 and a half, and 175, or maybe the lifter adapts faster and you increase at a faster rate, or there are different response types and things of that nature as well. So I tend to program with a static RPE and let the lifter's performance dictate the load. I know that some coaches plan with like a progressive RPE style, and that's fine. I don't. I think we can confuse the issue sometimes, or maybe we can. I don't want to say trick ourselves. It's maybe a bit too dramatic, but our performance, a lifter's performance, is going to be what it is. If you have the capacity to squat 200 kilos today, then that's what you have the capacity to do. Whether I program 7 RPE or an 8 RPE, it doesn't really matter that much. Like, your capacity is the same. The next thing to consider is the adaptation from the training, and that will affect your capacity for next week. But I don't think that when we plan an RPE progression, I don't hear most people doing it from a adaptation standpoint. It's not like week 1 we're trying to get more of a speed strength adaptation, so we'll use RPE 7. Then in week 2 we're trying to get a different adaptation, late rate of force development adaptation, so we'll program RPE 8. That's not why people are doing it. The reason why people are doing it is so that they can create a load progression. They want the lifter to see the weight on the bar going up. But the thing is, the weight on the bar going up doesn't necessarily mean that you got stronger. If the RPE is going up, the RPE is going up as well, and the way to get around that is through estimated 1 rep maxes. And if you had an accurate estimated 1 rep max, that's telling you the story of performance. And this is again where velocity can really shine, because it can help you get that really accurate estimated 1 rep max. And it can sometimes help you see, like, yeah, the weight got heavier, but I didn't really get stronger. My ability, my 1 rep max was the same throughout the block if the block didn't work, let's say. Or, it progressed, my strength progressed, but then it's more of a question of what allows my strength to progress faster. And if that's the debate, like I've had a couple conversations now with Sean Noriega, who does use a RPE progression. And I'm just kind of imagining now that I think he would say that he believes that it allows his lifters to make faster progress. And if you can kind of produce the data to support that, then great, go for it. But it would just be to remember that that's the goal. to get stronger, actually stronger, to make the 1 rep max go up. Not just the weight on the bar this week, but the actual 1 rep max. Let's make that go up. So whatever leads to that, then I'm in.
Actually, my coach is Sean Noriega.
Oh, cool.
Okay. Can you give us like final words for the powerlifters in Saudi Arabia? Some advices, general advices.
General advice is always difficult, but I've seen powerlifting growing through the region quite a bit. So I coach Patrick Hedquist at Desert Barbell in Dubai. I'm not sure if you guys, how much you guys interact with the Dubai powerlifting community, but my understanding of powerlifting in the region is that it's growing quite a bit, and I'm looking forward to going to Malta. And so how many Saudi Arabian lifters are going to Malta?
This. Can you just wait?
No. It's okay. We can take the video from here.
Okay. This year we only have 3 lifters: 1 female and 2 males. 1 in the 83 kg weight class, and me the 93 kg weight class.
Well, that sounds like maybe more than went to South Africa last year. I mean,
nobody.
It's hard to remember.
Nobody went. This is the first ever competition we go there. We go to the Worlds. This is the first ever.
Well, there you go. Fantastic. So of course it's objectively growing then.
Yeah. So
at least at the top level, and I mean that has to come from somewhere.
Yeah. Actually, in the Asian competition, in the first ever competition we compete in, we had over 10 athletes. We took over 20 medals, and we set 3 Asian records. So, yeah.
Fantastic. So, yes, Saudi Arabian powerlifting is on the rise, huh?
Yeah, let's hope so.
Fantastic. Good work. I'm sure that the work you guys are doing here is no small part of that. So, it's always good to see.
And we would like to have you and the RTS team maybe for a seminar or workshop, so you can go around in Saudi Arabia as well. It's going to be a different experience, eh?
That sounds wonderful.
It will be amazing.
I'd definitely be interested in that.
Thank you, Mike, for allowing us to have you in our podcast. We learned a lot from you. And last but not least, don't forget to subscribe and share the video. And don't forget to click the links of Mike channels, the YouTube channel, the Instagram channel. He have a lot of good information and a lot of great program. I think you have a book called or the training log.
The reactive training manual. It's a bit dated now, but it first came out in 2008 and covers kind of a lot of the origins of RPE and whatnot. So, but yeah, there's definitely lots of information. We have a free training log application on our website, and it's a lot of the stuff that I've talked about with you guys today. It's trying to help people make better training decisions. You could have a training log that's essentially your notebook where you just write things down.
Yeah.
But I wanted our training log to be a tool that helps people put the right weight on the bar, lift it the right number of times. So it's all about getting quality data back out of the log. So there's things like block reviews, there's things like target weight calculations and things of that nature. Just to help you understand like what's having positive effects in your training. How do you make training more effective over time?
All right. Amazing. Thank you very much, Mike, for your time. I think that's our time for the episode. It's been 1 hour. I felt like it's only like 30 minutes or 20 minutes. Time passed by very quick. Thank you.
And this was see you on the next time in the On the Bench podcast. Peace out.